just a few minutes early with some introductions so that we can make sure that we start the debate itself right at 7 o'clock. But the first thing we wanted to do is just welcome everyone here this evening. We really appreciate you coming out on this cold, wintry night. My name is Melissa Masick. I'm the president of Mid-North Organization. The debate tonight is being co-sponsored by Mid-North, Park West, as well as a subset of Park West, which is the Diversity Harbor group. A little bit about, we want to give you just a very quick introduction to our three organizations, and then we'll have the moderator go through the rules, and then we'll get the debate started here right at 7 o'clock. In terms of Mid-North, we are the neighborhood organization established in the 1950s. Our boundaries go from Fullerton on the north side down to just south of Armitage, where Ogden used to be, on the south side. East side is the lake, west side is Lincoln. And we were formed in order to protect this vibrant neighborhood and all the historical houses that are within it. We do have a historical landmark district within Mid-North. And the Mid-North organization does a lot in terms of making sure that we work to educate the residents about local issues, making sure that we're addressing safety concerns, fostering strong citizenship, reviewing zoning issues. That's one of the things that comes in front of us a lot, and also trying to create that sense of community by having some block parties and different events. We definitely encourage everyone to join your neighborhood organization, whether you be in the North or Park West and so forth. And I'm going to turn it over to my counterpart, Park West.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Nancy McAndrew. I'm president of Park West Community Association. Park West boundaries are Fullerton to Diversity, Lakeview to Hallstatt. Within our group, we have Coalition Diversity Harbor Lakeview Association. Its boundaries are the area immediately surrounding Diversity Harbor. Its president, Jean Fisher, could not be here this evening. Park West has been a community association for over 60 years, and our partnership with Diversity Harbor has lasted the last 30 years. Our mission is exemplified by tonight's forum. We are proud to support the important community service with Mid-North this evening. Thank you.
All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator this evening, Caroline Vickery, to take you through the rules and start the debate.
Welcome. Thank you all for coming out on this snowy night and supporting democracy. Thank you so much also to Dan Franks and Francis Parker School for their generous sharing of their beautiful auditorium for this event. We have a phenomenal panel of candidates here this evening. Impeccable credentials and backgrounds and ideas. Only one of these will be our alderman for the next 4 years. As for the rest, life will go on. For now, they are all in, and it's not easy to sit on the stage and to answer questions, hopefully difficult questions that we will be posing. And so with that in mind, we ask that you be respectful, model good citizenship, and let's just be a good audience. We have a very tight timeline this evening. The candidates have been apprised of the rules, which are rather complicated. We're going to have opening statements. We're going to have 4 category questions on different topics relevant to our neighborhood and the city. We're then going to have individual questions posed to each one of the candidates, which are crafted based on input from previous debates, candidates' platforms, and research. And then we will be having 2 rounds of challenge questions in which the candidates are free to pose a question to another candidate. Then we'll have closings. We wanted to let you know that all of these questions have been, they'll have to be answered in order. We're going to be going in order the entire evening. We're going to be starting with a different person every time, just so that you're aware of the order. And the candidates will also have an opportunity for 2 different comments of 30 seconds at any time after the individualized questions. These questions that are being posed to the candidates have been drafted by a committee of Mid-North and Park West members. They've been diligently researched, meticulously researched, and crafted with input from neighbors, our membership, and with research in local and city newspapers. So thank you so much for your hard work, committee members, on drafting these questions. We are going to ask the candidates to stay on schedule. Because the schedule is so tight, and so and also in fairness to the other candidates, there's going to be a yellow card when there's 15 seconds left, and a red card when your time is up. So finish your sentence, and that's it. There's going to be a bell if you keep on going, and that's going to get really annoying, so let's just back up. All right, good luck, candidates, and we are going to begin with number 1, Leslie Fox.
Good evening. I'm Leslie Fox, and I'm a candidate for 43rd Ward Alderman. I want to thank Mid-North, Caroline, Melissa, and Park West, and we are a better neighborhood because of the hard work that they do tirelessly, and I appreciate it as a member of the community. I am Leslie Fox, and I am running for Alderman. I was born 2 blocks. I live over on Cleveland Avenue on a historic street. And I lived here in my early 20s over on Hampden Court. We now live on Cleveland, and 8 years ago, almost 8 years ago, I moved back downtown to be a member of this community. We were in Glencoe, and we moved downtown to join Lincoln Park and be part of Lincoln Elementary, and then send our schools and join the neighborhood. And we were welcomed with such open arms by a community, and many of you are here today, and we are so grateful, and we love it here so much. I have a timeline, so I'll just tell you about myself. I started a business. Most recently, I've worked in the business community. I have started businesses from zero, had to meet payroll, had to meet overhead, always paid insurance to my, and health benefits to my employees. I have an employee, former employee here, who is now a rock star, who lives in New York most of the time, Kelly Glynn, and she worked for me for a while, and now, we all sort of work for Kelly in other ways. But I want to tell you, I have a business experience, and I also worked in the city of Chicago, and some of the big things I did was I ran the 94 World Cup, the 96 Democratic Convention, but more importantly, the Principal for an Aid program, which are legacy programs that brought people together. I'm running because I think that we are getting a lousy return on our investment, and we deserve a more independent, transparent leadership. I think this board got hit today hard, and I look forward to discussing it. Thank you.
Hello. Sorry about that. Hello, my name is Stephen McClellan, and I'm running for Alderman because I feel as if the city of Chicago needs representation coming out of the 43rd Ward that's going to speak to the greater good of Chicago while focusing on the 43rd Ward. I think that right now is a time where the city is about to see a lot of change, and we need someone who's going to step up to the plate and not be afraid to hold people accountable, not be afraid to be an individual that's going to be trustworthy, and a person who's going to tell the constituents the truth about what's going on in his intent. My introduction to the neighborhood was back in 1987, where I went to LaSalle Language Academy, and I loved that experience. Was such an amazing experience that I knew I wanted to live in Lincoln Park when I graduated from high school. From college. So I've spent my entire adult life here. For the last 14 years, I have coached at the Menominee Club for Boys and Girls. I'm currently sitting on the LSC at LaSalle Language Academy, where I'm the community rep. I have worked hard with my neighbors to fix an alley. I'm very dedicated to the 43rd Ward, and I genuinely understand how important this neighborhood is to Chicago. So my goal is to have representation coming from the 43rd Ward that focuses on our ward, but also prioritizes Chicago as a whole. We need representation that's going to step up to the plate and not be afraid to speak up. Moving forward, I live in the Mescadai building, and my main goals are to be an individual that speaks to preservation, be an individual that speaks to economic development, an individual that speaks to safety and education. I worked at the Chicago Board of Trade in the soybean mill pit for several years, and now I have a company that's called Youth Producers, and I do after-school programming. And fortunately, I come to Parker 3 days a week. So I just want to bring different perspective, accountability, and transparency to the ward and to the city of Chicago. And I think now is the time that we can do that. Thank you.
Jacob?
Evening. Hi, my name is Jacob Ringer. I'm running for Alderman. I'm doing this because I think we deserve better service. I spent 3 years working for the CFO of the City of Chicago. I was her chief of staff, worked both in and out of city government. And locally, I was the president of Lincoln Park Zoo Auxiliary Board, which all of us would know because we're 2 blocks from it. So I quit my job in April, and I've been going door to door full time since that time. I've knocked on over 7,600 doors personally, and I hear about 3 things: crime, taxes, and vacant storefronts. If we could solve those 3 issues, we could grow. And growth is our only solution. We cannot cut our way out of the challenges we face. We cannot tax our way out of the challenges we face. We have to grow. When it comes to crime, I've been on regular attendee at CAPS meetings. I know my CAPS officers now very well. I know my mailman, Teddy. He's a LSU fan. My 3-year-old Leo knows our street sweeper, Bill. But I don't know my beat officers. I believe that we should have police officers in our neighborhood that we can build a relationship with, that can build a relationship with us, who can understand the challenges we face and understand our neighborhood better. We take our police right now and we move them around. Night, day, beats, districts. They are not in a position where they can succeed. On taxes, I'm the only one up here who's brought a revenue stream, an ongoing revenue stream, without raising taxes, fines or fees. The digital billboard on the expressway was my project at the city. I oversaw that project, not only when it got passed by the alderman, worked with our private business partner going down to Springfield to change state law, and across 6 departments of the city to implement that project. This is my dream job. I spent my entire adult life here, and I hope I can earn your vote tonight. Thank you.
Rebecca?
Good evening. Good evening. My name's Rebecca Janowitz. I'm running for alderman because Chicago has never needed a thoughtful, committed, hardworking city council more than it does right now. I've lived in Chicago most of my life. I raised my children here. I am a lawyer. I worked for many years in a small neighborhood law office, and I've also worked for the government. I've served on the board of many charitable organizations, local school councils, a housing project for the physically handicapped, a great range of organizations. So I can say to you that I've looked at a community problem both from the perspective of a bureaucrat and from the perspective of the citizen who is angry with the bureaucrat. I've seen it from both sides. As I look at the city now, I think we have to invest in our struggling neighborhoods and build on the successes of our thriving neighborhoods. It's good that we have new potential sources of revenue on the horizon, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be focused on reducing expenditures where we can. We have to put our fiscal house in order, and a great deal of that means we have to have a public-facing, more open budget process where we can't have something like the TIF that came to life again recently. We thought it was dead, it looked dead, it was 22 years old, TIFs die when they're 23, and all of a sudden it's got another 13 years. It's not just that there's a problem with funding projects that way, this is a problem with openness. So my last commitment to you is that while I don't believe term limits are going to pass, I'm inherently term limited. I'm 65. I would be interested in serving a term, might be interested in serving 2 terms, but my retirement will be spent in the comfort of my home writing my memoirs. Thank you.
Derek?
Hi, I'm Derek Lindblom, running for 43rd Ward Alderman. Thanks everyone for coming tonight. I love our neighborhood. I love our city. When I moved home after school, this was the neighborhood I moved to. It's the neighborhood I met my wife in, had our first apartment together, bought our first house, brought our son home from the hospital. It's a neighborhood we're about to send our son to Oscar Mayer, the local public school, as soon as he's old enough. He's just a little too young. I've been involved in this neighborhood in a lot of ways. I've been on the board of my neighborhood association for several years. I've been involved in a lot of local and political projects trying to make our neighborhood better, help with our parks and schools. I care very, very deeply about this neighborhood and its future. So I'm not your typical Aldernanic candidate. I started my career in the United States Senate working on the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee on gun violence prevention laws. I went back to school where I was president of the Harvard Law and Policy Review, and then I moved home and I came here. After spending some time in the private sector turning around troubled companies, I ended up going to work for the city. 2011 through 2014, I worked on some of the hardest financial issues the city had. How do we consolidate city and county functions where the government's doing the same thing, so we're only using taxpayer dollars once, but we're using them more effectively? And how do we work on our hardest problems, those legacy challenges that no one's ever confronted? Things like our pension system, where I led the negotiations that got 28 out of 31 city unions, the Chicago Tribune and Crane Chicago editorial boards, to agree on the start to a solution. After that, I went back into the private sector, and I helped start several health tech companies, including one that helps over 100,000 people with type 2 diabetes and employs over 300 people. I'm running because we have real challenges in the city. We have a financial crisis, we have a violence crisis around the city, and even more so, more and more today in our neighborhood, but especially all over. And we have real challenges when it comes to our ethics in city council, as we can see from the news every day. We need someone who's going to run at the hard problems, not away from them, and I have a track record of doing it, and that's why I'm doing this, because I believe in our future, and I think we can make that change. Thank you.
Alderman Smith?
I'm delighted to see you all here, and have been happy to work with so many of you in this room. You know, when I became alderman, there was no ethical oversight of aldermen at all, no independent budget office, no absenteeism task force, no limits on lobbyists. I've led on all these things and on finally helping to remove Ed Burke from control of the workers' compensation program. Continued change requires experience, and I brought my own life experience to this job. I was a very different kind of person than the typical city council member. I interned on Capitol Hill in the House during Watergate, then went to law school at the University of Chicago, where I argued in front of members of the U.S. Supreme Court. I then worked here in the U.S. Attorney's Office for 9 years, convicting, among other things, a whole bunch of corrupt Chicago public officials. Then I went on to become general counsel of the $1.5 billion subsidiary of a Fortune 500 company. And when I was asked to run, I said I wanted to run to help try to solve the problems of the city. Public safety is our #1 issue. We've seen a spike in crime. And we have 136 new police officers, 20 new surveillance cameras and more on the way, and a new program to help youth. But the bottom line is, we must stop re-offenders. Today, there are 1,500 more kids and there are 18 in our ward. We invested over $60 million in our school and began the One School, One Community effort. Our schools are our gems. Our businesses are solid. We've brought more than 69 businesses to our board just this year. And my record shows my past experience. I'm one of the top 10 most independent aldermen in the city. Our board needs an independent voice, which we showed today in the Plan Commission when we fought against the consideration of the Lincoln Yards development at such a quick and terrible way. Thank you. Talk to you more.
Thank you, that was fabulous, everyone. We're now going to move on to the category questions. We are going to begin with Steve McClellan, and we'll go in this order, just so you know. Leslie Fox will be the last one to go. The first question is, according to Blair Kamen, architecture critic of the Chicago Tribune, residents and surrounding neighborhood groups overwhelmingly believe that the current Lincoln Yards plan is, quote, too big, too dense, too tall, and is going too fast. The developers state that they will not proceed with the development without the tax increment financing being granted. If you were on city council today, would you, A, vote to approve the current plan, B, vote to grant the TIF for this project, C, explain?
So, I'm going to say no to voting. I think that it is going too fast. I think that they need to scale back a little bit. The initial plan to have a stadium really was a negative for me, and TIFs, I'm completely against the TIFs coming to this district. I believe that the TIFs should be used for neighborhoods that really need the TIF money, lighted areas. I'm not a fan of a developer coming into a neighborhood that already has economic development and building here. I think that TIF money should be used, like I said, towards neighborhoods that really can use a spike in infrastructure and economic development. Now, I also think that this TIF money can be used for the greater good of education. How do you get more social workers into schools? It also can be used, because I think the TIF last time was used, in education was used for cameras. And I'm not thinking that that's the best use of this money. A company like Sterling Bay, they have $1 billion line of credit for Chase. And I think that they should lean on that rather than leaning on the TIF money that comes from the taxes that we're putting into it. So I've always been against it, and I think that they have moved way too fast. I think that they need to scale back. I also am not a fan of the fact that they've added 3 million square feet to the project, and I would vote no.
Thank you, Jacob.
So, Lincoln Yards passed Plan Committee today, and our alderman's approach on this has been no park, no deal for the last 2 years, and it looks like we're going to have a deal at no park. I've been talking about infrastructure for 3.5 years. A lot of the Plan Commission today, and when I was at the Joint Board of Review, I said that the complaint that residents have, that voters in the city of Chicago have, is that they go to things and want to be able to talk about the whole thing. And you're told, no, this is just about the Plan Commission meeting, it's not about the TIF. No, this is just about the eligibility of the TIF, it's not about whether you should do the TIF. And on and on and on. And we go around this revolving door. That being said, 3 neighborhood associations today supported the plan to move forward. I know Wrightwood Neighbors was one of them. I know Lincoln Central was one of them. We have gotten a lot of very positive things for this neighborhood because of this conversation and this community. We have east-west bridges, one at Armitage, one at Cortland. We have no more stadium, which is a net positive, and we have a commitment for funding of a school. Now, is every detail sorted out? No. But today, on Alderman Hawkins' website, after the Plan Commission, when I was reading the traffic plan, there's a traffic plan. It's been reviewed by the city. So I would vote yes on Lincoln Yards as it is today. On the TIF in 5 seconds, I would say not yet. I think that fight's not over yet. I think we need to define the projects that are in the TIF, and the TIF needs to expire as soon as those projects are completed. Thank you.
Rebecca?
I would vote no on the project. I think it is still too large, too dense. It's not got the human scale that, frankly, so much of this ward still has. And I think it's a great shame to build something as large as that and as dense as that. That does not mean that I don't think that there are infrastructure needs. And while I agree that money that is to go to a blighted area should go to a blighted area, this is still an area with infrastructure needs. The whole city has infrastructure needs that need to be approached. So we need to look at what is the best way to approach these problems. And it's clearly not to do it through a TIF, because so much of what is happening then is not transparent, and we don't have the clear sense that we need. The basic bottom line in city government is people need to know where the money's coming from and where the money's going to. And that really has to be clear, and that's not true in this case. And we need, it's not clear at all to me why it would be useful to have the infrastructure coming through the private developer. That's another concern. But basically, on the project as it stands, no, and on the TIF, no.
Thank you, Derek.
So I don't think there's anyone on this stage, at least I hope not, who was happy with the process of how things went down today. I think now we're in a position where we're a little bit behind the 8 ball, and we've got to figure out how to fight on the areas that we really care about, that are really going to affect us. And unfortunately, I think that the same areas we've been talking about and fighting about, and this community we need to advocate for since the very beginning. And I think number 1, that's infrastructure. I'm terrified about what's going to happen with traffic. Anyone who's tried to get on the highway around Cortland and Elston has already spent a lot of time here. You've probably grown very familiar with it. If we don't do something about that infrastructure, if we don't fix that highway, even before we put in another 6, 7, 8,000 people, another potential 50,000 commuters, we're going to regret it because we're going to have a traffic nightmare. I I think we have to really focus and fight during the last parts of this process now, after today's big announcement. And we have to work together to figure out a way to get that infrastructure fixed. Because if we don't get it fixed, we're going to have a real problem for this community. I'm open to how we fix that infrastructure. If we fix it through TIF dollars, if we fix it through other sources of revenue, we're able to get federal grants for it. But we need to fix that infrastructure. It has to be priority one here. And we've got to get more green space. I'm glad to see it's gone up to 11 acres. I'm glad to see there's no stadium, but we need more. And we need to figure out the school impact before we do anything. We've got to get back at the table on this issue, otherwise we're going to be served for dinner.
Thank you. Alderman Smith?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to comment about the day's events. As you know, I've been working on this issue since the framework was issued 2.5 years ago. And we identified very early that there was a potential for looming development right outside our borders. And we needed to have the right to speak on these issues, even though it was not in our ward, which is a very important point about the fight about aldermanic prerogative. Because ward boundaries are temporary, but neighborhoods don't change. Which is why we got involved, and our neighborhood organizations got involved, and did the best they could under very trying circumstances and sometimes limitations of information given to them to make the decisions that they thought best. So I led the charge to create this park because of the complaints of so many parents in our community that their kids didn't have enough place to play. We knew, and it has been shown today in Plan Commission, that the developer has a lovely plan for getting all the infrastructure necessary to support its development. But what we haven't shown is that these plans are going to provide a public benefit. Yes, I hope that we do get bridges and roads and things like that, but added to the 13 million square feet of development, the 25% increase in development that was approved in 4 days, you have to wonder whether it will succeed. It's been a long uphill battle, and we are winning in many ways. Alderman Hopkins has promised to double down on getting the very park that we've been talking about. So I don't agree that we're not getting a park. Thank you.
Thank you. Leslie?
So for those of you who came in, I'm Leslie Fox and I'm running for Alderman, and this is an easy question, and it's a 3-point question. No, no, and no. And I say to my colleague Derek Lindblom, for those of us who have been living in this neighborhood for 7.5 years, we are tired of fighting. We don't want to fight anymore, and we are tired of losing. There has been a lack of leadership and transparency in this process where I said publicly when I entered this race, the TIF is happening, the fix is in, this is all theater. This is all theater, whether the stadium goes or where it comes. We lived through it with the Lincoln Annex, we lived through it with Children's Memorial, and now we're gonna live through it with Sterling Bay. So you know what I say? That's 3 strikes. 3 strikes, you're out, because we have congestion already. TIFs were created for blighted areas. This is not a blighted area. And everyone here should know, this is our money. This is our money that is being spent. This is not a blighted area. I am not anti-development. We do need to grow our city. I am very invested in growing our city as a mother of 3 children, as a CPS mother who has served on the LSC. But enough is enough. We have no business touting ethics reforms for what is going to go down in history as the most corrupt city council. And we certainly should not support a development where what the process was happened behind closed doors. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to our second question, and Jacob is going to start this round. The majority of our property taxes go toward funding Chicago public schools. Property taxes in this ward are at record highs and slated to increase even more. Would you commit to utilizing all of CPS's low-cost remedies, such as changing boundaries, moving magnet programs to other schools, and changing designations of schools, before calling for costly school expansion projects when so many other schools in nearby neighborhoods are under-enrolled?
Yeah, so look, I think the reality is that a lot of this neighborhood is landlocked now, as we all know. That's why Lincoln Yards is such a unique opportunity. So we built a $30 million annex. It's 5 years later, when those towers open, that annex could be full. We need to have a conversation as a neighborhood, as I've said for months now. We need to have a conversation about how many students are in our schools, how many schools are in our neighborhood, and who goes where. Oscar Mayer's at 90% utilization. Alcott has a ton of room at like 83, and we could be close to 100 as soon as the towers are open in Lincoln Elementary. We have 2 more magnet schools in this neighborhood. This is a tough, real conversation, and people have had a lot of history on this conversation, but we need to have this conversation. I don't think building a $2 million turf field and throwing $20 million at Lincoln High School is solving our problems. We need a 5-year plan. We're the only neighborhood in the city, the only ward in the city with a growing CPSH population. And we're gonna I get questionnaires all the time. What are you gonna do about closing schools? We're not closing schools in this neighborhood. It's an incredibly tough challenge for this neighborhood because we are so different than the rest of the city on this issue. We have amazing schools in this neighborhood, and we all wanna go to them, and we wanna send our kids to them. So I hope we can find a plan as a neighborhood to keep that.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Well, I think that this is a conversation that has to include people from other communities too, because we are not that different. We all want the best for our kids, and that is the unifying factor. Everybody's paying taxes in different ways. Everybody's paying taxes, including people who don't own property. Everybody pays taxes, and everybody wants the best for their kids. We have a very complicated real estate portfolio in CPS because the good schools are not in the good buildings. The buildings you want to save often have crummy schools in them. It's going to take a lot of work, and some of that work is going to have to be done across board boundaries and across community boundaries to achieve real access for everyone. Because we've got to remember that the city is not going to be able to move forward unless every kid is going to a decent school. That is just the bottom line. Public education is the most important public resource there is. It's the foundation of our democracy. It moves us forward. And we have to work as a city to make sure that we're making the best use of our resources. So if boundaries have to be changed and enrollment areas changed, we have to approach it with a spirit of understanding and communication and recognition that parents who have less than we do still want the best.
Thank you. Derek?
So I'm glad this question got asked. This is actually the first debate I think we've had this question, and I think it's a very important one. Look, I'm a soon-to-be CPS parent. We have some other CPS parents in the stage, current and past. I think it's important when we're talking about this issue that we think about how are we going to develop our schools for the long term, not just next year, not just 2 years from now, but 5 or 10. When we're talking about what we're putting on the table and what we're taking off the table, let's look at what's causing our capacity issue. The biggest challenge to our capacity right now is Sterling Bay is planning to move in somewhere between 350 and 500 kids into Oscar Mayer and Lincoln Park High School's catchment areas. So you know what? If we're going to do that, great. You've got to pay for the school that can handle those kids. You can't just dump them on our schools that are almost already at capacity. Let's be thoughtful about how we're investing in schools so it's not just, hey, we have more people coming here, let's cram them in and shoot up the class sizes. Let's plan ahead. If we're going to redraw the boundaries to where the Sterling Bay development is for Lincoln Yards, let's redraw them before anyone moves in, not after people move in. Let's plan ahead for it. Let's have an alderman who's thinking of those projections every year and issuing you a report on what the school areas are going to look like. I just want to take a second. I think Rebecca made a great point there. It's also important not just that we have great schools, but that we have an alderman fighting to make sure every kid in Chicago has great schools. I think all of us love and rely on CPS who are involved with it, but it's very important that everyone in the city of Chicago has a chance to send their kid to a school as great as we do.
Thank you. Alderman Smith?
Thank you. I agree that we need to think ahead. I agree we need to have a plan, and we've been executing one for 7 years. So today, there are 700 more kids under the age of 5 than there were when I started, and when I started, there were 700 more than the year before. So we have 15 new preschools in our community. And we did the demographic analysis to say we needed to be able to accommodate our growing school population while ensuring that other kids who come to our neighborhood because they want to come to good schools could do that. And the answer to that was our beautiful Lincoln Annex. And we projected the populations that would grow in the next few years, and they are exactly on track. And the school was in fact built to design to accommodate the projected growth from Lincoln Common. So we've been on track. Alcott Elementary School, we decided not to try to merge it, which was one of the proposals at the time, but instead to allow it to thrive and give it resources to increase its curb appeal, the beautiful $1.5 million Alcott Field of Dreams. That school is now well over 60% neighborhood. It was 30 when I started. So, and it is now, it has scores just as good as Lincoln Elementary, and scores of new parents are populating our area. The same thing is true of Lincoln Park High. We are parents, so we formed one school, one community to invest to get neighborhood kids to go to Lincoln Park High, and they are doing it more and more. And that $60 million in investments is building classrooms and labs and is helping them grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
So I have been watching the schools. We moved into the district for schools, and I have seen and been a victim of inherent lack of planning with my 3 kids who went to Lincoln Elementary. I then decided I couldn't just complain about it, I had to get involved. So I ran for the local school council for the high school, and I sat and worked on budgets, and we had to make draconian decisions, whether cutting a librarian versus keeping a math teacher. And we had to make those decisions, and we failed our children when we made them. And there was no social service for our kids as our crime goes up. There is no planning. Lincoln Elementary, I have talked to the parents, I've met with the principal. They are at capacity, and they haven't even moved one person into the new towers. They are full. No one wants to be in a classroom with 37 kids, 36 care. Lincoln Park High School, I was on the local school council on a Tuesday, and my kids told me on Saturday that the alderman and the mayor were announcing some project in the school. The LSC was completely locked out of that, as they were with Lincoln Park Annex. We have to stop this. We need equity in our schools. We need parents working together, the community coming together. We don't need to have a conversation. We need to have transparent leadership that represents you in the council and talks to you before decisions are making, because you're the ones paying for that investment.
Thank you. Steve?
Okay, so as a product of CPS from K through 12, CPS means a lot to me. And being an individual who grew up on the south side of Chicago, I had to travel to Lincoln Park in order to get the education that I received. And if we look at Lincoln Park, every school within Lincoln Park is at a level 1 or level 1+. And I want to know any other neighborhood that has schools performing just like that. Now, I do believe that, I like the fact that we do have level 1+ schools, but they should not just be in one neighborhood. You should not have to travel to the north side of Chicago in an affluent neighborhood to receive a good education. I think that magnet schools need to be all over our city so kids can be able to go and get quality education no matter where they live. We had, this is a touchy subject because, you know, there's so many kids out there who have to go to their neighborhood schools and they have no resources. But all the resources are in this neighborhood, and I'm not opposed to that, but I am opposed to having to travel all over the city just to get a quality education. Some folks do not have the resources to do so. Therefore, they cannot go to these level 1+ performing schools. So I am in favor of having more magnet programs around the city, but I also do believe that, you know, this neighborhood is a unique neighborhood and you won't find anything else like that out there.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the third category question. This one will begin with Rebecca. Serious crimes, including carjackings and robberies involving guns, are perceived and might possibly actually be up significantly in the 43rd Ward. Yet police are diverted elsewhere, and many repeat offense arrestees, including for crimes involving guns, are released on minimal bail or electronic monitoring, much to the dismay of Sheriff Tom Dart and local news publication Inside Booster, among others. Would you push back on these policies, and if so, how?
Well, I'm very concerned about the increase in violent crime, and in particular, the decrease in arrests for violent crime. We have seen Professor David Olson, who's sort of my guru on these crime questions, talks about the decrease. We do have consistently very harsh penalties in Chicago. People will be surprised to find that someone who is accused of a crime for which they could get probation is far more likely to get that probation down in Southern Illinois than they are here in the city, which is not how we think of ourselves, but that is the reality. So I believe we have to do as much as we can by improving police training, support, technology, and police and community relations. Everyone focuses on poor police-community relations in very poor neighborhoods. I often find that in affluent neighborhoods, there's not the level of communication between the police and the community that you would like to see there either. Because there are things that the communities can do to reduce crimes against property and free up police time to focus on the kind of things we all fear and that we ought to fear and we ought to be very focused on. But it's important when you look at these very difficult issues not to fall for very simple answers that ignore the complex realities of the roots of crime. It's a bad idea to say, oh, we just have to crack down on all gun offenders without acknowledging there's a range of offenses, many of which do not include actually doing anything with a gun. Thank you.
Thank you. Derek?
So I think many of us feel the change in crime and violence we've had in our community. We know that, intuitively what the stats show, which is since the last election, assaults are up 73% in 43rd Ward. Sex offenses are up over 50%, and motor vehicle theft is up 68%, for example. We know what's happening in our community, and we have to take action. So let me talk about a couple different actions we have to take that I think are a smart approach to our increasing crime problem. First, we're not very good at solving crimes right now. And as a result, there's not a level of deterrence to committing crimes in our community. So I'll give you an example. Right now, the murder rate in Chicago for clearing a murder or solving a murder, is shorthand, is less than 20% or around 20%. The rate on shootings is 5% or less. Many other crimes hover around that rate. So people don't feel the effect of deterrence, and they feel that they can commit crimes more brazenly in our neighborhood and many others. We have to invest in our detective bureau, get our detective numbers back up, and train our detectives to bring successful cases that prosecutors can't help but win, so we can make sure we get that deterrence effect back. But let's just not take that approach to it, just a pure policing approach. Let's also invest in mental and behavioral health. Let's invest in data-driven violence prevention and mentoring strategies that we know work. Let's be smart about our money too, to have wraparound strategies against folks who might go into a life of crime, but can instead be supported and go on to become productive tax-paying citizens.
Thank you. Alderman Smith?
Well, crime is our #1 priority, there's no doubt. And I think everyone here agrees that just more police is not enough, because there's a critical disconnect between crime and the consequences. We've added 136 new officers. We've gotten some of the high-tech tools that are helping police turn these new crimes around. Carjacking didn't exist, because now your high-tech fob doesn't allow your car to be stolen just from the street, like in the old days, they need the key. So new strategies are being devised to stop that, and things are turning around, and they're nowhere quite yet there. But it's not enough. Crime has to have consequences. We passed new laws hiking penalties for repeat gun offenders. They've never been used. Juvenile crime has been a real problem in our neighborhood. And a study of juveniles who use guns and crimes were found that 42% of them were arrested a year later, and half of them for more violent crimes. So something has to be done on how we treat juvenile offenders. I support laws to screen people who use guns and crime to see if they really should be held for the protection of the community. Now, we do hear sometimes about this issue about police being reassigned. I don't believe it is true, and our commanders tell us that. Occasionally, officers have to be reassigned, but the fact is the 18th and 19th district receive more police officers than we actually let out because of the number of large special events we have to keep police on the street. Things are improving.
Thank you.
Leslie?
These young offenders, when you close and you work for an administration that closes mental health clinics throughout Chicago, those are consequences that have real impact on us and our ward. These young families that we are so happy to have in our ward and that are the future of our ward, many of them that I've talked to that compelled me to run for office don't feel safe walking in our streets. I am so delighted that members of this table and the other are now supporting my idea that you have to have a social worker in every public school, that the cost of not having a social worker in every public school is more teen repeat violence. I know at the Chicago Public Schools there is inequity, even in Chicago. So police are moved from the ward, and I know that as a homeowner who has called the police and gotten very high-ranking police officers to our home. And I said, how did I get so lucky to get you? And they said, we're the only one here. We are paying some of the highest taxes in the city of Chicago, and we are being cheated of the police that we pay for. And the police have been functioning without a contract for I don't know how many years, but that is inflating our pension hole for next year. So we need leadership that will address that problem and not continue to let it fester. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Sure. So first, I want to say that I think our detectives are overworked. I also believe that one of the issues that we're facing are the illegal guns that are in our city. We can talk about suing other states, but how are we going to get to the point of these people and these kids not using these illegal guns? I also believe that police training plays a major role because we have police officers who are patrolling neighborhoods they do not live in. I've had an incident myself in the 43rd Ward where I was pulled over and yanked out of a car by a police officer who thought I was a drug dealer. Yeah. And he didn't realize that I was just a regular constituent going to Best Buy until he looked at my driver's license 30 minutes later. I also think that we need to invest in our mental health facilities, and I know everyone else has been saying this, but we need to start looking at resources. How do we take away the stigma for actually having a mental health facility within a neighborhood? How do we have affordability, accessibility? It's deeper than just adding cops to the street. We have to get to the base of what the real issue is. How do we show these young men and women that someone cares about them? I mentioned this the other day, the Disturbed and Dismay. They came up to the north side because they said no one up here cares about them. Just last weekend, there was a mikvah challenge. And at that mikvah challenge, there was not a single candidate up here. And those kids told me that all they want wasn't a single candidate up here that was there. And those kids just want someone to show them that they care about them. Someone who's going to look out for them and really give them the resources that's going to allow them to not want to pick that gun up. They do not want to do that. So it just comes down to mental health.
Thank you. Jacob?
So, yeah, and look, I've been going to CAPS meetings, and some of this is just communication. When there's an incident, like there was in this neighborhood this summer, that I think shocked everyone in this room, the alderman didn't send it out. I find that she only sends things out when she has an arrest to report. And sometimes just information is enough. This is what you should be on the lookout for in your neighborhood. A week and a half ago, I went to a CAPS meeting on a Tuesday and said to the officers, there's been 6 car window break-ins on my campaign office block, the 2100 block of Halstead. 2 store owners' car windows were broken in front of their storefronts. 2 days later, there was another attempted car window break-in. 7 cop cars showed up, 3 unmarked cars, and they arrested the guy, the car, a block and a half away, which is great. But really, all we had to do was tell the police that there was crime in our neighborhood. I think we should have open office hours. I think we should have, it's called Ward Night, 4:30 to 6:30 every Monday night. You could do every other night, you could have that about crime. The alderman is your representative, should be your conduit to the police department. CAPS meetings are every other month. We don't have to wait that long. The alderman gets to trade their budget vote for something. We could trade it for more police. 136 new officers sounds great. And then I looked into it. How many retirements did we have? Right around that number. Our police aren't growing in this neighborhood. We could do better.
Thank you. Again, fabulous job sticking to your time frame. We're going to now have the last category question, and we're going to begin with Derek for this one. Which mayoral candidate do you most support and why? And which candidate's election would most concern you and why? Please name one for each.
So I'll start with this. And I'm not actually endorsing anyone for mayor right now. I'd be very curious who people here are voting for, because I've not done over 18,000 voters' doors in this community. And when we do that, we actually hear most of this community is still very undecided, because we hear people not talking to what are our needs and what our future policies look like. The fact is, I actually think the mayoral race has been pretty bereft of any real policy, of anything besides commercials about personalities. And I think it's a real problem, because I want to know what people think. And then when I hear what people think, all of a sudden I start hearing words like lakefront tax, and people talking about taxes that would raise our property taxes 50 to 100%, which my campaign came out against almost immediately, because it's a real problem that's going to push so many of our longtime residents out of this community. The fact is, we don't need someone who's going to do what a mayor says. We don't need someone who's going to vote with any mayor 90% of the time, because no one's right 90% of the time in Chicago. What we need is an independent voice. We need someone who's going to provide a check and a balance. And I think that means not endorsing anyone for mayor. I think that means whoever's working as mayor, whoever is elected, whether it's someone we're scared of or someone we start to get excited about, it means still checking and balancing them. It means still telling them when they're wrong and still encouraging them when they're right. And I think this ward is willing to support that kind of independent, reform-oriented leadership. And I think that's where we should head.
Thank you. Alderman Smith.
Well, I'm not making any endorsements for mayor. I'm focusing on our race. In fact, one of the reasons I'm running is to make sure that this ward has continuity in a period of incredible uncertainty, so that you can continue to get the services that you need and work with departments at a time when a new mayor is actually getting up and running. But I also think it is also incredibly important to maintain independence from the mayor and not be aligned with any candidate. What's important is a mayor who shares our values regarding fiscal responsibility, public safety, and growing the city. I am one of the top 8, according to the Tribune, one of the top 8 aldermen in this city who have voted against the mayor. And the mayor is supporting me in this race, because he knows that my independence and working hard for my community is something different than when we argue, like the really big argument that I had with the mayor today over Lincoln Yards. I went right to the guy who is supporting this Lincoln Yards development and said, no, we are not, and we should not go forward for a lot of reasons, even comparing that Lincoln Yards deal to the worst deal the city, before the city, except the parking meters. And they're both worth about $1 billion, so it's a good thing. So I'm a recognized leader of reform and a recognized leader of independence, and I will continue to do that, representing for you whoever is the next new mayor. And I've been recognized for my leadership in this forum. Carol Marine last night on TTW said that thanks to Scott and me, we were the true ethical leadership in the city.
Thank you. Leslie?
Well, here I am going to have to agree with the 2-term incumbent alderman that we are at a historic crossroads in our city. We are going to usher in a new mayor for probably the first time in maybe 100 years, because it was pretty, well, or maybe it was one family for many years, and then our current mayor was determined by the previous mayor, sort of anointed and elected. So this is a historic time, and I think what's really important is I know a number of the candidates, and a couple of the candidates have live in this ward, and I have worked with them at the highest capacity in City Hall. And they know I am an independent voice. They know that when I worked for Mayor Daley, as a young woman, when I disagreed with him, I said no. One of the candidates, I told him I was saying that on the campaign, and he said to me, yeah, when I'm mayor, I don't want to hear that. You're not going to be as spoken. I said, I certainly am. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity to have experienced leadership that knows what departments do, how to navigate bureaucracy, how to get lights fixed, trees trimmed, and potholes covered, and that can bring communities together to deliver results for you, the residents. Thank you. Steve?
So I'm going to name some candidates, and I might be the only one brave enough to do so. So let's just really get into it. So I'm not saying these are people that I'm actually endorsing, because they haven't endorsed me. So when it comes down to independence, I'm about as independent as it gets. But personally, I think Paul Ballas is a good option. I also believe in Amara Inya. Hopefully I'm saying her name correctly. And then Lori Lightfoot, only because those candidates are actually speaking to some real change in the city, which is what we need. As far as who I will not endorse or even think about voting for is any candidate that has had to give any money to charity.
Thank you. Stephen.
So I'd like to thank Steve for answering. I think we're at 2 of 8 now. I will also answer. I'm going to probably vote for Lori Lightfoot. I think Bill Daley, Tony Preckwinkle, and Susanna Mendoza are most likely to make it into a runoff. As for who scares me most, maybe John Kozlar, maybe Gary McCarthy. There's a couple out there. You know, I think it's interesting because 4 years ago I went to 4 or 5 of these debates, and I remember I'm with the mayor and the mayor's with me. When I started running for this job, I started running because I thought we deserved better service. But now that Mayor Emanuel's not running for re-election, I'm worried we have an alderman that won't be able to pass any legislation. I literally can only think of one instance where the alderman has passed a bill without the support of the mayor. So, for me, I think it's important to have independence and success. I've heard a lot in the last few days about the times where I've whipped votes and we came 2 votes short on ethics, or I stood up today at the Plan Commission and we failed. Building relationships in City Council, being able to work with fellow aldermen to accomplish things is the job. We need someone who can succeed at that and work with any mayor and lead on important issues. I could lead on finances. I could lead on other issues that we desperately need because we don't know what the next mayor's priorities will be. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca?
I guess I have a different idea of what answering the question is. When this election, when before Mayor Emanuel withdrew from the election, I supported Lori Lightfoot. I gave a fundraiser for her at my house. I was very impressed with her intelligence and her commitment and her willingness to come out and run against him, and I give her a great deal of credit for that. When Tony Preckwinkle entered the race, I called up Lori and I said, you understand, in my opinion, she has more experience in government than you do, and I will be shifting my vote. No one ever asked me for an endorsement. I'm not a labor union or a famous old person. So nobody asked for my endorsement, but I think the question is who I'm voting for. So I'll be voting for Tony. The candidate I most fear is actually not Bill Daley, because I don't think he's going to win. I have a deep, visceral dislike of the idea, after I grew up under Daley 1, my children grew up under Daley 2, that my grandson, a beautiful and intelligent child, will grow up under Daley 3. But I still think of the bad options we have, Susanna Mendoza is the worst because she is tied at the hip to Michael Madigan. And whatever I thought about Ron, he did not take orders from Michael Madigan. So that's where I'm at with this one.
Thank you. We are now moving on to the next round of individualized questions to candidates. And this round will begin with Alderman Smith. Alderman Smith, you are our current alderman and the most experienced candidate running. That also means that you have a record you must defend. In prior elections, you promised to prioritize residents and neighborhood groups closest to major developments. However, some constituents believe your commitment to this promise has been inconsistent at best, often angering neighbors and creating distrust. As a result, you currently have 5 challengers opposing you. How would you assure voters that in your next term you will hold transparent processes and prioritize those most impacted by decisions you make in the 43rd Ward?
Well, I'm not sure I agree that my 5 challenges are here because they didn't like the Lincoln Common development. I think some of them like it very much. Lincoln Common began as a very public process that began even before my tenure. We met extensively with all the parties, and I think many people in this room were directly involved, and they had every right to be. The process was prolonged because of private litigation. In the meantime, we had a community of businesses that were withering. You have to balance many factors. Now it's going to be open very soon, and I think everyone will be able to judge very quickly whether or not, on the whole, we found the right approach. And we work in the last 4 years, for sure, as the previous one, with all of our community groups on trying to find out what they like, what they need and want on development. For example, just recently in the Mid-North area, the Mid-North Association very concerned with their landmark district. in response to a request from the Mid-North Association, we downzoned a particular property that really could have changed the character of Cleveland Street, which was very, very important to do that. And we do that to protect our districts throughout our community, working closely with Old Town, Lincoln Central on very many developments, Brightwood Neighbors, and Ranch Triangle. And I think that the community groups are generally satisfied with what we're doing because we provide a very, very open and transparent process, of which we're very, very proud. So I'm very, very proud of my record, and I think my record on development now is very, very good, and I'm proud of my record.
Thank you. I forgot to mention that this is the time when the candidates are able to start using their comment cards, which are 30-second comment cards. And so if anybody would like to make a comment, they can, starting now. Otherwise, we'll move on with Leslie's individualized question. Okay. Leslie Fox, you have extensive experience in the public and private sectors and a long history both downtown and in this ward. You have proposed and completed big projects for Chicago. However, the city's finances have changed, your plans are expansive, and you have not committed to any new revenue. Big plans take big money, but taxpayers in the 43rd Ward are stretched to the limit. If you are against raising taxes, privatizing public assets, and gambling, how do you propose paying for additional police, schools, and infrastructure?
So I'm personally opposed to increasing gambling, certainly not run by the city of Chicago in the Loop. I mean, that would just be a nightmare to have the current city council and current city hall run a casino. I am very open to expanding possibly on the south side and opening to listen. I am open to, I support marijuana cannabis, and I support it in Lincoln Park, and I hope it ends up adding to our empty retail and some additional restaurants near it because other wards are going to have it. I will...
Language interpreter. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that's a good point. We didn't have a language interpreter. I'm sorry. Anyway, we were talking about enhanced revenue. Every week there's a scandal out of City Hall. So this week, Grant Thornton's getting a contract, which we're paying for to do another audit to clean up another scandal. I am going to eliminate the biggest tax we're all paying, which is the corruption tax. I'm going to vote against it. I am going to add transparency and light. And as a result, we will save money because the taxpayers will have a voice in how it's planned and how it goes. So I believe there is more money in the system. We will not be giving TIF money that belongs in blighted areas to wealthy developers and their supporters. And there will be more money on the table to cover our needs and expand our growth. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve McClellan, you were passionate about your educational experience at LaSalle and the opportunity it provided. You continue to devote time to that school and others. However, this tight ward is overflowing with students and traffic while other neighborhoods are losing population, have under-enrolled schools, and have had their communities gutted. How would you weigh the conflicting interests of those who live in the 43rd Ward wanting priority over decisions in the neighborhood and full access to schools closest to them and continued access to those same schools for children across the city, forcing costly school expansion projects and increased congestion?
Wait, repeat that again?
You want me to read that again?
Yeah.
I think you get the gist. It's very similar to the other question that was asked. You want me to repeat it?
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, repeat that.
Okay. However, this tight ward is overflowing with students and traffic, while other neighborhoods are losing population, have under-enrolled schools, and have had their communities gutted.
So, as we spoke about this earlier, I am in favor of having more schools in other neighborhoods. I do not believe that you should travel all over the city to get a quality education. Plain and simple. I mean, it's all the resources are in one neighborhood or in little pockets of the city. And kids have to travel from the west side all the way over to the north side just to get quality education. We need them. We need more magnet schools. We need more resources on the south and west side so those kids can have quality education. I will say that until the end. So I genuinely believe that we need more funding into schools that can help out the kids that are not just in affluent neighborhoods.
Thank you. You did. Thank you. Jacob Ringer, you have extensive experience in finance. and know the city's financial challenges well. Your solution to many of the issues in this ward is growth. However, many in this charming but congested community oppose increased traffic, crowded parks, overcrowded schools, massive glass high-rises, flashing billboards, casinos, and privatizing public assets. How would you reconcile your call for growth with residents and these neighborhoods groups' stated desire for preserving the character of this architecturally significant community?
Thank you. Yeah, so look, I grew up appreciating hardwood floors, wood-burning fireplaces, brick buildings, and ivy. I don't think that growing and protecting our history and our culture and our community are at odds. I think that the two towers at Lincoln Commons don't fit with the surrounding buildings, but I think if you move them to Clark and Wrightwood, they do. I think our neighborhood does have pockets where you can do a lot of density, and I support TOD. And I support the extension of the TOD, which is, transit-oriented development. So just recently, the City Council voted to expand it to bus lines. We have tall buildings and buses that go down Shopton, get on Lakeshore Drive, and head downtown. That meets the definition of a good public transit. We can put more people there. I think we need businesses back in our storefronts. I think we need people to spend money in our storefronts. We all know that part of this neighborhood has changed significantly. And when we tear down a Six Flag full of 20-year-olds and put in a family and 3 kids in a 2-car garage, I mean, parking gets easier, but it also hurts our storefront. It is about balance. It's about having enough people in our neighborhood to still be in our neighborhood. You don't have to go very far north of Clark Street to understand that problem, because there's no DePaul kids anymore. They can't even afford to live here. Frankly, they qualify for most of the affordable housing that the city would offer if there were redevelopment.
Thank you. Oh, a comment card.
Absolutely. I just want to comment on this vacant storefront thing. Does anyone remember the streets in 2011? Clark Street, Lincoln Avenue was 33% vacant, Armitage Avenue was 11% vacant, and we started a vacant storefront strategy, as you know. And today, as a result of that strategy, the vacancies on Clark Street are in half. And Armitage is the unquestioned leader in the city of Chicago of clicks to bricks retail. This didn't just happen. We held commercial broker meetings. We used to choose Chicago. I went after the guy Winkler, which everybody knows about. So we're really doing much better, and of course have a way to go.
Thank you.
Do I get to respond, or
And
use a comment?
if you would like to use the comment card right now,
I
you
will
may.
use my challenge also.
You may.
So last Thursday, the alderman said the so-called vacant storefront problem. So on Friday, I went and took pictures in front of 35 vacant storefronts on 4 blocks on Lincoln Avenue. The alderman said there's a 3% vacancy rate on Lincoln Avenue. I don't think I have to say much more than that. Then, heck, when was the last time anyone's walked down Lincoln Avenue? Feels like more than 3 vacant storefronts to me.
Thank you. Thank you for using your comment card. This is getting fun. I'm not forgetting where we are in our order. Rebecca, you have the next individualized question. Rebecca Janowitz, your extensive public service record and devotion to helping those in need is commendable. Yours would be an indispensable perspective on City Council. However, you have little experience in the 43rd Ward and almost no experience working with our well-established neighborhood groups and school communities. How can you adequately represent this particular ward with so little experience in this community?
That's a very fair question. And as they say on Monty Python, a fair question and one which of late has much occupied my mind. I would like to say to begin with, that we could get a city council full of people who worked as hard as the people in the neighborhood organizations, we would be doing very well. And this has actually been my experience in a number of communities that are not as thriving as this one still tend to have some community organizations. And I have to say this, it's often the women who are really putting in the time and the energy, trying with the resources that they have to solve the local problems. And I find there are these common threads in our civic life. And I'm not going to tell you, and everybody's probably heard how I explained how I got here, that I looked around the city of Chicago and said, this is where I want to live. Or I graduated and met this was my first job or anything like that. But since I have come to this neighborhood and lived here, first of all, by moving here, I got to walk to work every day, which is the greatest luxury a human being can have. And so it's motivated by gratitude. But I do find there's a lot of common threads in working in community, no matter what community it is. And communities with engaged, involved people are the communities to live in, and the communities to work in, and I hope the community to represent.
Thank you. Derek Lindblom, you have an impressive education and resume of public and private sector experience. You are a prodigious fundraiser, surpassing all other challengers. However, much of that money comes from wealthy and powerful interests. The most contentious conflicts in this ward result from moneyed interests and big developers from outside the ward overruling the interests of residents who live here in the ward. Zoning laws are changed, mega developments are pushed through, and residents are ignored. Please reveal your vision of development in this historic neighborhood and how you will assure voters will serve your interests and not those of big donors.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'll start with the talk about fundraising. I think there's a real movement for change, not only just in this ward, but in the city as a whole. There's a feeling that city council has failed us and we need to do something different. I'm lucky enough that a lot of the folks who funded a lot of the presidential campaigns, like Obama's presidential campaign and others, are in this ward and are willing to take the chance on a new candidate who they think has a real vision. So, I don't know if there's conflicts with, folks who've given to political campaigns. I can tell you there's no conflicts with anyone giving to my campaign for two reasons. Number one, most of these folks actually aren't developers. They're private folks who've had success in business and want to see something new in city council. And number two, if there ever is a conflict of interest, I have a clear way of recusing myself in that situation. So there's never any instance of pay-to-play developer behavior in our ward. And I think that's incredibly important. I think that's the cornerstone of any development policy, is make sure you're not taking from the person who gave you the big project. I think when you talk about how do we want to develop this ward, I would say one clear thing. We want to balance our density with our historic need to protect our neighborhoods. This is a wonderful community because of the architecture, because of the community, because of the neighborhood feel. Towers belong on the lakefront. That's great. The density there makes sense. But let's keep our neighborhood someplace where it feels right. And I gotta say, let's not make it all McMansions either. Let's make sure the historic 2, 3, and 6 flats are still part of our community too, so everyone can afford to live here.
Thank you. We are now moving on to the really exciting portion of the evening. It's called the challenge question portion. And this is going to begin with Derek. He is going to be going first, and he is going to pose a question to another candidate. They will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond. And feel free to use your comment cards during this time. This is going to get pretty fast-paced. And we're going to go through this twice, so get your questions ready, candidates. All right, let's go. Derek.
Sure. I'll ask Leslie. Leslie, you've had several comments in our debates about the need for mental and behavioral health, and I know it's something we both share a passion for. However, I don't think we've had enough chance to address it in the debates. I was wondering if you could get a little more in depth to the importance of social workers and mental and behavioral health with kids, especially kids at CPS.
Yes, even at Lincoln, thank you for the question, Derek. I appreciate it. This is something I'm very passionate about. My oldest lives in Minnesota, but my second child graduated from Lincoln Park, and he's in California. He left so many kids behind, even at a beautiful, wonderful school like Lincoln Park High School. Kids that were left behind because they canceled a librarian, because the college counselor had to be phased out for 6 months in order to support core curriculums. Mental health, kids, teenagers need support. And not everyone has parents like us that show up on a winter night that are able to support our kids in the schools that they do. So I feel that in a world-class city like Chicago, in a world-class neighborhood like Lincoln Park, every child should have the support in mental health services that they need. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Michelle, it is your turn to pose a challenge question.
Jacob, you said that being an alderman is your dream job, but some would say that being chair of our beloved zoo's auxiliary board is also very, very gratifying. What was so good about it, and what was challenging about it, and would you advise others to get involved in that way?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so I was term limited out of that job, so here I am. It is a great job. It is a great job. So, like the challenges are that it's made up of 85, 25 to 40-year-olds, and you can imagine what challenges come with 85, 25 to 40-year-olds. But it's every day. It was an amazing opportunity to support the zoo. We do 3 major events every year, and my son and both my sons love the zoo. Mr. Singer, the zoo's an institution, so it's one of the most fabulous things we have in our neighborhood. I really do love this neighborhood, and I have to say that the zoo should really consider a truck social. We've had some conversations in the past about how we can bring our community together. And if we did a truck social, I bet there are a bunch of kids in this neighborhood, because we have a ton of them now, that would love it, and the zoo would be a perfect place to host it.
Thank you. Leslie, it's your turn to pose the challenge question.
Sure. I've been, this is for the Alderman Smith, and we've all been very polite, and what's your favorite color, and what's your favorite breakfast, but I just have to ask that you're touting being a reformer when the IBI IPO rates you at 40% independent as of 2015. So how do you sort of square that when Alderman Wagasback is like at 90 something? I'm curious about that.
Well, I don't know about the IPO rating. I haven't sought their endorsement this year, but I'm very, very proud of my record. As I said, the Tribune said I'm one of the most independent aldermen in City Council, and I'm really leading the way on ethics. Carol Maureen just was on television yesterday in the wake of these horrific, amazing allegations of not only someone wearing a wire, but even really more horrifying, the reaction of some of my colleagues who said people who wear a wire are rats, and they shouldn't be respected. And that was so shocking and so outrageous to say that we were, and in the wake of this, I've been toiling in the valleys of reform since I started. And it is hard, and now we know why. Because when we had the vote on the Inspector General, some of the aldermen who voted against this bill were the ones who are now under indictment. And if they were not there, those bills would have passed. And so I'm glad that we're coming to a new day of ethics reform.
Thank you.
So do we get 2 questions? You're going to ask another round?
We're going to do 2 rounds of challenge questions. This is your first challenge question to pose.
Perfect. So this question is going to go to the alderman. And it's a simple question. I just want to know why you always challenge my petition signatures. I'm being so serious. I really want to know.
Well, I've been challenged too, Steve, and the bar to become an alderman was pretty low. It's 437 signatures. And I have to say, Steve, you have grown so much as a candidate since our last election that I'm really proud that you're on the ballot. And you do have to prove, everyone has this burden, and it happened to me, and I think it's important that if you are trying to run for our alderman in our city of Chicago, they have to come up with the legal requirements. But, that's all.
I jumped you on this one because Steve has been a member of this community. This is the power and the privilege of incumbency to utilize their donor base to be able to challenge democracy and getting on the ballot. They changed the law while we were all sleeping in Springfield and made it harder to get on the ballot to ensure that they could stay in the current status quo. So cheers, Steve raises a valid point, which I completely support. Elections are good for democracy. Voices should be heard.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
So I didn't have an answer. I didn't hear an answer to that. My comment is that, it takes a lot of courage to get out here and talk to people and ask them to sign a petition signature and to waste a lot of taxpayer dollars on an individual who turned in 1,293 signatures that he got solo because he went through this exact process in 2015. I still don't have an answer, and I still respect you. However, I just wish that, the waste of tax dollars and just the waste of this game would stop. And I really would like to know why you challenged me.
Thanks, Steve. And then we have another challenge, Rebecca.
Well, I just wanted to comment that it's not the burden on the person who's challenged. I was in that situation of being a lawyer and having to hire lawyers. But the point is the burden that this automatic challenging by the incumbent places on the taxpayer. I filed so many signatures, it was over 15 hours of review, which you all paid for. Do you care that much about having every signature I collected reviewed? It's expensive.
Thank you. Okay, we are on the next challenge question is Jacob.
So I'm going to ask a question of Derek. At our trib Ed board, you mentioned some responses that Alderman Smith had on her endorsement questionnaires. And just today in the trib, there were 2 aldermen that submitted endorsement questionnaires to the trib that were almost identical, which brings up some questions. So, as you know, I've released all my endorsement questionnaires on my website. Rebecca has joined me. I think others are considering it. Will you do the same?
Sure. So it's funny, no voter has actually asked me this question, but I don't
I'm a
think it's
voter.
I don't. I'm sorry. Oh, I guess Jacob knows this voter. Hold on. If Jacob's still in play, this is going to change how I'm going to answer this question. I didn't know I had a shot there. I have an absurdly detailed policy section on my website because I've been a policy staffer the whole time, but I actually don't think anything's wrong with posting the questionnaires too. So I'm happy to say, if everyone wants to do it, sure, count me in.
Great.
Okay.
What are those?
Your challenge question is next.
I have a challenge question for Derek, and I'm kind of proud of it because I think it's a nice follow-up to the individualized question you got, and that was just an accident of democracy. Derek, at the Wrightwood Neighborhood Association debate, you criticized aldermen who take money from developers and supported creating an independent board that reviews aldermanic conflicts of interest. Would you consider donations you have received, such as $5,600 from an executive at MCZ Developments, or $1,000 from an executive at Fulcrum LLC, or an executive from the Glazer Corporation? Potential conflicts of interest.
So the short answer on this is exactly why I've put forward the idea of having an independent board if there ever is a conflict of interest. If I ever have a personal relationship and someone wanted to give me money for some reason because they believed in the change I think they think we could have in city council, I don't think I should be ruling on their development. I just don't think it's a good idea. I think it furthers the pay-to-play culture. So this is exactly the reason when someone said, well, what if you had a conflict of interest? And I said, you know what, that's a really good point. In those situations, I think you need a neighborhood association and neighborhood leaders who, in that rare situation, I think there's 2 or 3 that you mentioned, where you can take someone, you can say, you know what, I shouldn't be making this choice. And someone else who really knows should be making an official recommendation so we can tell if this is fair or not. And I think it's a great point, and that's kind of why I did that.
Okay, we are now going to move on to the next round of challenge questions because this is getting more fun. Alderman Smith, you are the next one to pose a challenge question.
Well, mine is for Steve. Steve, you and I have worked together on the LSC LaSalle, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what it's like to be on an LSC and what you've learned in that capacity.
Okay, well, number one, I think it's an honor to be on the LSC at LaSalle. It's a school that I went to school there and cherish those memories so much. To be honest with you guys, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to really try to make decisions that are going to impact the future of so many kids that go to school at LaSalle. It's a thankless position, but I've learned that you just have to be dedicated to making sure you're making the right decisions, because we're there to make sure that the kids that attend LaSalle Language Academy are prepared for the next steps. Like I said, I have a lot of pride in that position, and it means a lot to me. And to answer that question, it's really hard because I'm not in these meetings thinking about how is this making me a better person. I'm always there thinking about how are we making these kids better, and how we're preparing them for the future. I will.
Thank you. Leslie, you have the next challenge question.
So we've all, as a panel, spent a lot of time together in these last couple of weeks, and one of the things, my question is for Derek, and I'm just trying to understand this. One of the things that you talk about is the pension reform and the success that you've had in tackling this issue. And my question is, we know you're a lawyer and you went to the best law school. And my question is the plan was deemed unconstitutional by the Illinois Supreme Court. And so I just want to understand the thinking of how that was a success when it's something that was unconstitutional as a lawyer.
Sure, I'm happy to talk for it. So I'm actually very proud of my work in pensions, and I'll tell you why. We weren't doing anything on pensions for years. We were letting it just sink and sink deeper into debt. And that hurts everyone here, and it hurts every retiree. Because you're in a situation where we make promises and no one was planning to fund them. We were in a situation where we actually had funds that were missing almost $4 for every $5 that we're supposed to have. And that money is all going to come out of your property taxes. That money is all going to come out of the city as a whole or out of the retirees. And no one was taking that issue on. And I had the courage as a staffer to volunteer to work on an issue no one wanted to because it's not politically popular and there's no easy solutions. And when we worked on that issue, we got that historic compromise. Now, yeah, we're still in a situation where we still need to make progress. And as Leslie said, some of it has gone forward. Now, we're luckily now in a better situation on pensions than we were before because of that work, because of that roadmap. But there's still progress to be done. And that's why I'm running, because I believe someone needs to be there to run at those hard problems.
Thank you. Steve, your challenge question is next.
Okay, so my question is for Mr. Ringer. All right, what have you done in the 43rd Ward that has to do with education, business development, safety, or the infrastructure?
Sure. So my son, Leo, goes to chalkboard, and Sherry, who's been at chalkboard for 40 years, is leaving. So I was able to rally together the parents. I guess I'm a future CPS parent. I guess that's the term here. We were able to help bring that community together and transition over to one of the assistants, and it looks like that's going to keep going on business development. So I worked for the city. I think that, I guess none of the digital billboards are here, but I think that is something that brought revenue into the city and helps businesses. I also worked at M-Hub. Again, not on the 43rd Ward, about half a mile outside. So M-Hub is a manufacturing incubator space. It's like 1871, 63,000 square feet, and $6 million in manufacturing resources. I ran membership there for almost a year, about 400 different members, so worked with startups and bringing people together. Thanks.
And you can continue going with your challenge question.
Oh, right. So, Alderman Smith, this question is for you. You are a self-proclaimed reformer and one of the most independent aldermen, and now that my fellow challengers are considering releasing their questionnaires, I ask, would you also release your special interest endorsement questionnaires along with everyone else on the stage?
Well, I will say that, sure, but I will say that I do have a record, and if you want to know where I stand on anything in this ward, you can just go to ward43.org and look at the 7 years of newsletters that I have sent to you, to over 22,000 people in our ward. So my record is very clear on just about every issue that there is.
Thank you. Okay, Rebecca.
That challenge question?
Yes, your challenge question.
My second challenge question. To Alderman Smith, you have supported building a casino as a way of raising revenue for the city. Would you support having that casino located in the Loop so it can appeal to tourists and perhaps minimizing the harm to struggling communities and can be more easily policed?
Well, let me say about my support for casinos. It's really extremely reluctant, and it's really done because I asked the ward after Mayor Emanuel's pension speech what you wanted. And what you wanted, what the ward said, was that we still want to go at pension reform. even to the extent of doing a constitutional amendment to try to fix the situation with COLAs. Everyone, a very large majority of people favor the legalization of marijuana and using the revenue from that to help fulfill the pension obligations. And then we are all very reluctant to support casinos, and I really have been against it in the past. And the only reason that I would support it today is because our constituents think it would work for pensions. Now, where it would go, I really don't have an opinion. I think that's something that we have to hassle through because there are undoubtedly problems with casino gambling, video gambling, sports betting, and all the other kinds of things. I think we have to work with our governor on these problems. Thanks.
Okay. And did you have a comment on that?
Just my comment was, it wasn't clear that you were saying, would you put, I guess my question still is, would you put it in the loop?
Maybe. I think it's up for a conversation, big conversation.
Okay. We're now on the final challenge question for Derek.
Sure. My last question is to Alderman Smith, and actually just to follow up on what we were just talking about. Alderman Smith, you mentioned about a month and a half ago, you did a poll or a survey on pensions and on pension debt and pension challenges. And my question is a simple one. In the last 8 years before this poll or survey, why haven't you led on this issue or taken any real action on our biggest fiscal challenge?
My goodness, I've spent an enormous time on pensions, and you can see that in my newsletter. In fact, I came into office and urged the first hearing on pensions, and I gave that bill to Alderman O'Connor, and he gave it back. And then I said, you know, you guys have got to have a hearing on pensions because otherwise the pension plans will never admit that they're insolvent. And they changed their minds and they had the hearing. And maybe that's when you start working on the issue. But I've been calling for pension reform for a very long time, so I actually have led on that and our other structural challenges. I believe in taking money out of government, and we've done that. I created an absenteeism task force, which sounds kind of mundane, but the truth is that we lose millions and millions of dollars due to bad HR practices. And through that, absenteeism at Streets and Sand, the Water Department, and CDOT have been slashed in half, and the things that came up in our study are being used now to address police overtime.
Thank you. Hey, we do have a comment card here. And then well, this is the end of it, so if you want to use your comment card, comment away. So this, I mean, if you have anything left.
So,
I didn't keep track, it's honor system.
so I would say this. I think this gets to the crucial issue, and frankly what I think is the big choice in differentiation. We have serious issues like pensions, and they require taking political risk. It requires more than hearings. It requires proposing plans and real action. And it requires embracing that risk and being a leader, even if it's politically unpopular, even if it's difficult. We have real tough issues in this city, and if we solve them just through property tax increases like we have the last couple of years when we're facing issues like this, we're going to be in a situation where more people are going to have to leave our neighborhood. We've got to tackle these challenges directly.
Thank you, Michelle, or Alderman Smith.
And I'll use my card because, as Leslie said, the plan that Derek worked on failed and was declared unconstitutional. And at the time, state law required that property taxes had to be used to fill the hole for the police and fire pensions, which is why I did vote for the increase. And fortunately, we were able to use other means to fill the gaps caused by the failure of that idea. Now, the situation is different. Other ideas are on the table. We have a new governor, we have a new legislature, and I will not vote for any more property tax increases.
We have another comment, a final comment?
Sure.
From Derek, there's a couple more over here.
So I think this is a very important point to clear up. The state law actually did not say you had to do property taxes. The state law said if you didn't do anything else, property taxes would automatically happen. The city could have solved it any other way. It could have solved it through cutting waste. It could have solved it through other sources of revenue. The alderman chose to solve it through property taxes. And I think it's a failure of imagination, it's a failure of creativity, and it's a failure of willingness to make any tough choices except increasing your property taxes.
And Jacob.
So, I have a little experience on pensions also, because
I was the one that actually worked with the actuaries in 2011. That did start in May, right after Mayor Manuel took office. I understand these issues really deeply, and they're surprisingly complicated. And they don't work the way you think they would. So making people retire later costs you more money. Making them retire early doesn't save you money. It's very weird. But the important point here, and I'm losing my train of thought. I'm sorry, thank you.
Thank you. And other commentaries that have been unused. I think everyone has used their commentaries, are finished, and we are now going to begin with our closing statements, which again starts with Leslie.
I just want to thank everybody for coming here. My name is Leslie Fox. I'm bringing to the table 30 years of experience in the public and private sector. I've been living in this community. I've been participating in, and one of my strengths, I believe, is listening to people and bringing people together. And I just want to mention that, earlier we were talking about Lori Lightfoot. I'm delighted that she has contributed to my campaign for alderman because she wants to see me in the council as an independent, transparent voice. And I'm also honored that, I don't know, the one name is Richard Nodebart, who built the museum for his wife in the ward. And he is someone I worked with, one of the many CEOs I've worked with in the private sector. And he is supporting my campaign. And Mr. Don Rose, and he was a Republican business leader. And Mr. Don Rose, who is the most progressive voice in our community, in our city of Chicago, who's made real change, is also supporting my campaign. So I can work with everyone, I can listen for everyone, and I will stop talking right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Okay, so just to end this, I will let you guys know that this neighborhood means so much to me, as I've said since day one. Okay, now if you guys are looking for an individual who is doing the dirty work, an individual who has been in the schools, an individual who has worked with the alderman, even though they may not have the same ideas moving forward, an individual that has worked with his neighbors to get an alley fixed, an individual that has added green space to LaSalle Language Academy's playground, an individual who has shown the Old Town Triangle that transparency is the proper way to go. I have not bragged about anything I've done. I've never taken a photo, nor have I received $1 for any of the civic duties that I've done in the 43rd Ward, nor the neighborhood. I've worked with businesses in the neighborhood, and we have gone all over the country. And I'm talking about Chicago's Doghouse. Okay? I've worked with businesses, I've worked with the constituents, I've worked with the kids in this neighborhood, and I am a candidate that is here for the ward, but I'm also here for the city of Chicago. I represent transparency and accountability, and on February 26th, vote Stephen McClellan.
Thank you, Steve. Jacob?
So I want to thank everyone for their time tonight. It was said that this is my dream job, and it is. This pin is my dad's pin. He ran for this seat in 1967 and lost. That was the election after Patty Baller. I love this neighborhood. My wife and I are here, and sorry we missed McPhone Saturday. I was snowblowing. So I do want to address the rumor that if elected, I will snowblow everyone's house every time it snows. I would not. I would snowblow some houses sometimes. I'll do my best. I'm not the best politician on the stage, likely, because I won't always tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what I believe. I think I'm a good neighbor. I think I can do this job. This job takes both ability to go downtown and vote and the ability to pick up a snowblower and lead your neighbors. I love our neighborhood. I love our community. I think we are better together than we are apart, and I think it's time that we start saying that more often. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Rebecca?
I just wanted to make a brief suggestion about one of the ways in which my experience outside this ward could benefit this ward. In the past, when I've been running programs to provide job training for at-risk youth and helping them get soft skills and all kinds of support and case management and train for a real job, one of the things I could not get for them is a reduced bus pass. You could get a reduced fare if you were attending a prestigious university, maybe on your trust fund, but you couldn't get that to get to a good program on the South Side, Division of Restoration, to learn how to be a welder and be the first person in your family earning a really impressive paycheck. And I think that's the kind of knowledge that I bring about the whole city, which will help us tackle some of the problems. Crack down on crime, yes, but let's crack down also on the lack of opportunity, and that requires an understanding of how communities work, which I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Derek?
So thanks everyone for coming on a cold night like this. I think this election, one of the things we'd all agree on is this is an incredibly important election. We have serious challenges around violence. We have serious challenges around ethics. And we have serious challenges around finance. But there are real differences between where we are today and where we could be and should be. On ethics, we have to eliminate side jobs. We can't stop at halfway reforms. We only get this chance once every literally 50 years if we judge by the chair of the Finance Committee. Let's take advantage of that once every 50-year chance and really push and really make a difference by banning side jobs. Let's put in term limits so we finally don't have the same people who are in city council until they're going to jail. We can make a difference. We can tackle those hard problems. We can tackle our finances. I've been there on the hard issues. I had the courage as a staffer. If I have the courage as a staffer, I can only do more as an elected official. You only have one chance to put someone in that seat who can make a real difference for you, who can fight for you, who can take chances for you. And I'm here to be that change for you.
Thank you, Derek. Alderman Smith?
Thank you. I've been fighting for this ward for almost 8 years now, and I've led the fight in our city on ethics reform, transparency, good government, every day by actually doing the job. Cleaning up government, smart decision-making, and saving taxpayer dollars isn't about sounding new or putting ideas on a mailer. It's about doing the work that's needed to be done and getting the results. And we have gotten those results. Just yesterday, we introduced a huge package of reforms, and I am a co-sponsor of reforms that will lead to greater oversight and, yes, requiring aldermen to be full-time, to have only full-time employment as aldermen. I'm running to finish the job of that ethical oversight. I'm running to ensure balanced development in our ward, for the wise use of taxpayer dollars, to complete the revitalization of our schools, and to get stronger gun laws to make us safe. It's an honor to represent you. As we go forward in the future, it is uncertain. Do you want to start over, or do you want to continue on the momentum we started? And thank you very much. It's an honor to serve, and I look forward to serving again.
Thank you so much, everybody. You were absolutely fabulous.
I do have a petition outside, so if you want to see the number of aldermen cut in half and vote on that next election, stop at my table outside. Thanks.
And we have to be out by 9, so let's please comply with that. Thank you.